Welcome back, everybody, to Cool Times Podcast, where we talk all things cool about the cold storage construction industry. We are your hosts, Jenna and Vince Free. And joining us today is a phenomenal guest. She is an architect. So actually our first architect on the show.
It's exciting.
Yeah, she's the director of industrial cold and food for Ware Malcomb. She has 16 years of industrial design experience and 11 years in the cold storage and food processing environment. At Ware Malcomb, she oversees a team of specialists across North America, focusing on design and technical knowledge needed for these types of projects. So, ladies and gentlemen, Kate Lyle.
Yay,
Hello.
welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Yes, thank
We're
you.
so excited to talk to our first architect today. So thank you for sharing your expertise with us.
Absolutely. I'm thrilled to be here.
She's actually been highly requested to be on this show.
Really?
Well, we have an architect, and everywhere you turn, Ware Malcomb's all over the page. So, yeah. So we're excited about this one.
Well, why don't we start out and let you tell us a little bit about yourself, personally, professionally, how you ended up where you are now.
I always wanted to be an architect, and I went to school at UC Berkeley. I knew I wanted to be an architect. I didn't know what kind of architect I wanted to be. So I got out of school and went searching for a job, anything in architecture. I don't know what I want to do. It was tough getting that first job out of the gate. I interned for a bit with a custom residential designer and realized I do not want to do custom residential design.
Well, it's good to learn what you don't want, right?
Was not for me. And then I was taking a woodworking class and found out one of the guys there was an architect. And so he brought me on to, make the coffee, answer the phones, and maybe do a little drafting. And they did industrial buildings and office buildings and a little bit of retail. And so I did that for a little bit. And after about a month, they said, okay, you're not going to make the coffee and answer the phones anymore. We're just going to have you do the drafting.
Yeah.
And so I worked there for a number of years. I worked there for, I think, 6 years. And it was a fantastic learning experience. But by the time I left there, I knew how to do a speculative industrial building in my sleep, right? They're very formulaic, right? It's very like, panel is this wide, the side is this wide, the yard is this deep. So it was very, very formulaic. So at the end of that, I'm going, okay, I like industrial, but I don't want to do speculative anymore. And so this was the recession and I was pregnant. And so I'm searching for a job. I'm, not getting anything. It's the recession. I'm pregnant. There's no chance. I go on this interview, 6 months pregnant. My husband's looking at me like I'm absolutely nuts, right?
Sure.
Completely. Why are you going on this interview? Why are you wasting people's time? But I went on the interview and it was with Bruce Jillings.
Sure. I know Bruce.
Yeah.
What's up,
a lot
Bruce?
Of people. Shout out to Bruce. He's absolutely been my mentor. And they hired me. 6 months pregnant, knowing that I was going to be going on maternity leave in a few months and everything else. And they specialized. One of Bruce's specialties, and why Vince knows him, is a specialist in cold storage. So once I started doing cold storage, I'm like, this is it for me, right? This is the kind of architecture I want to be doing. I love the technical aspects of it. I love how complex the buildings are. They're little puzzles, right? So there's always things to puzzle out. So I really loved doing cold storage. And then I started doing some food processing, and there's a lot of commonalities between the two. There's always cold storage and food processing, and so just love these types of buildings and really, really enjoyed working on them. A few years ago, I made the move over to Ware Malcomb and was really looking for some place where I could continue to grow my career. I kind of hit a bit of a ceiling at my last gig. Wasn't ready to be principal, but didn't really have other steps to go up. And so one of the great things about Ware Malcomb is that they really are built to allow for a lot of career growth. Like there's not really any ceilings.
That's amazing.
It's an amazing structure. And so I joined on and they're like, oh, well, we're doing some cold storage stuff. And we started doing these like speculative buildings,
Some cold storage stuff.
So there had been, a number of projects across the country. Chicago had done a fair amount of projects with preferred freezer. There were some projects in New Jersey, some projects, around the country, but nothing that was really consolidated into this is a practice focus, right? So we had some experience, but not a practice focus. They had just done a DFW cold spot, which was the first speculative cold storage building in the US, in Dallas, Fort Worth.
Wow.
And a lot of interest drummed up around that. Like, oh, speculative cold, that's crazy, right?
Yeah, what's that? Yeah, what's that? How
What's
do you do
that? What's that? How do you do that? So I kind of got a chance to take that and run with it and start talking to a lot of developers and a lot of different people about how to do speculative cold and, different ways of doing cold storage. So it's
Yeah.
been really fun working for Ware Malcomb. They've given me a great platform and get
Absolutely.
to educate people and talk to people
I
and do all sorts
know.
of fun stuff.
I love
That
it.
sounds really exciting.
We're gonna get into the speculative cold and that design and how that looks. But
Mhm.
first, you speak about Ware Malcomb. They're very well known in our industry, becoming more and more well known. I think I follow your guys' Instagram, and you guys have offices all over. I mean, I don't even know Ware
Mhm.
Malcomb to follow. There's Chicago, Atlanta, California. You guys are everywhere. Tell us a little bit more about Ware Malcomb, the size, how many offices, how many
Mhm.
people are under your umbrella focusing on the cold thermal details and designing
Yep.
them buildings. Yeah.
So Ware Malcolm's a huge company. I think we're over 900 employees at this point, and we have offices across the U.S. So most major metropolitan spaces in the U.S., as well as offices in Canada, in Mexico, and in Brazil.
Wow.
So it's a huge company. My little section of it is small. So the cold storage group is a growing practice. We have a number of people in our Irvine, California office who specialize, a number of people in our Chicago office who specialize, and then we're
Yeah.
training people in all of our other offices in order to make sure that we have regional presence. What we found with
Sure.
cold storage is, there's a lot of universality to the design.
Sure. Yeah.
There's things that are consistent across all markets, but
Yep.
you need people who have that local presence in order to work with the local jurisdictions, to know the local codes, to know all the nuances of what each area is looking for. So pairing that national expertise with that local presence, I think has been really, really successful for us.
Yeah. So that's amazing. And then for Ware Malcomb out of Irvine, I know I met some Chicago folks at a couple trade
Mhm.
shows here and there. So I know you guys are both kind of doing speculative cold. So
Mhm.
for the listeners that have no idea what that means, what exactly does that mean if you're telling someone for the first time ever?
So speculative cold storage is building a cold storage building without an end user in mind. So this is a developer driven practice where someone comes in, they've got the capital, they say, let's put up a cold storage building and we're going to try and lease it out to a cold storage user. Obviously, there's a lot of challenges that go into doing something like this. So if you're trying to do a cold storage building that's going to fit a wide variety of users, what temperature do you put it at?
No kidding.
Right.
Right?
How many
What,
rooms?
how many
How tall's
rooms?
the ceiling?
What kind of refrigeration systems do you put
Yeah.
in? So there's a million questions that go into how do I make this as
Yeah.
flexible as possible for as wide a variety of users? So what we've done is we've come up with ways of designing the building that allow for a certain amount of flexibility, right? So like how many rooms you can design it so that there's, breaks in the roof structure so that you can put in demising walls. You're not going to get them everywhere, but you can set up refrigeration systems and demising walls so that you can create separate rooms, oftentimes utilizing convertible refrigeration systems that can cover a range of temperatures. We can do things like, rather than doing a roof structure, we can do a ceiling, which is more expensive at the get-go, but it allows you a lot more flexibility in where those
Sure.
demising walls might land.
Yeah.
We're pretty much installing most of the slabs as freezer slabs,
Okay.
because if you want to have any of those spaces at freezer, you need to have that freezer slab installed. There was a concept that we came up with also that was called cold ready, and cold ready hasn't really taken off in terms of construction. I think there's a couple of them out there, but cold ready was doing a shell. So not putting in any of the systems, not putting in the slabs, but designing the structure of the building so that could be converted to cold storage. Now, this concept came out before pandemic, before supply
Yeah.
chain issues, before all of these things. And so I think
Mhm.
that's really a big part of why it didn't take off, is that everyone realized, well, yeah, we can build the shell, but then it's going to take a year to get a refrigeration system. So that's not going to work right now in this kind of supply chain universe that we're living in. So we've got to front load those refrigeration systems. But I think it's an idea that has merit if a supply chain ever stabilizes a bit more.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Wow.
I've been seeing a hybrid of cold ready though in the market, right? So I've been seeing the speculative cold buildings being built. They're doing a refrigeration system, but they won't but they won't put the slab in. It'll be mud slab. Right?
Yep.
So, I mean, there's hybrids, I guess, going. I mean, this market has exploded. And
right.
I mean, the developer market out there has exploded, and they're building and leasing these things like crazy. And do you see it slowing down at all?
I don't think so. I think the vacancy rates are incredibly, low on cold storage. So, 2% or less, which basically means there's no cold storage available for people to move in to. And there's plenty of companies that are just looking for a space where, gosh, I've been working with public refrigerated warehouses, but I'm spending so much on that. I need my own space. We see a lot of that. We see, public refrigerated warehouses continuing to grow. So there's a lot of leases that have been public refrigerated warehouses because they've filled up all their pallet positions in a market. And gosh, there's a new cold storage facility. Let's move into there. Processing is one, and it's a challenging thing with the cold, but that's part of leaving out the slabs, is like, okay, that gives you the flexibility to do a freezer slab or a slab with a bunch of floor drains for a processor.
Yeah.
So
I was going to ask her about that, because it's all cold storage right now, and it's all, minus 15 or minus 10 in the freezer. Then your cold dock is 35, and it's just kind of cut and dry. But, are developers coming to you ask and say, hey, I want to build a speculative cold, but let's build it for the process people out there, because food is growing like crazy. All these new food developers are coming to market, and you see all these new food products, and you're like, well, where are they making this? Where are they manufacturing this? Are they, is this a market for the smaller guys in the food manufacturing companies to use a space like that?
Absolutely. We're starting to see a little bit of interest around that. I think everyone is a little hesitant. If you start doing food, you get a lot more complexity. So you've got things like, how do I size my sewer system? And do I have enough water available? And all of these other aspects that just add another level of complexity. I barely got them up to the complexity of doing spec cold. So taking it to that complexity of doing processing is definitely another hurdle. But I think that there's a huge amount of opportunity. There's so many startup food companies, and they'll just go into warehouses and just it'll be a disaster, right? They've just like Mickey Mouse something out of an existing warehouse, and so I think there's a lot of opportunity there to really be a good space for processors.
Sure.
Wow, that's awesome. Can you tell us how you got into the cold storage architectural industry? Like I remember you saying, like, you did a little bit of residential and you were like, not for me, no thanks.
Yeah. So it was pure luck. It was pure luck that I got hired by Bruce, and that he was doing it, and that, it gave me an opportunity to see these products, because most people, they have no idea that cold storage exists, right?
Yep.
Like, you ask most people, like, I talk to people about, oh, what do you do? I do architecture. What kind of architecture? I do cold storage. What's cold storage? Well, imagine your refrigerator, but then make it 100,000 square feet.
Good luck.
They don't know.
It's very, very hard for most people to imagine that all the food in this country is coming through these enormous buildings, that just hold nothing but pallets and pallets and pallets of food. So, when I was started out in cold storage, it was just such an eye opener to me that these buildings existed, and that they were fascinating. And they're, cold storage is also always on the forefront of a lot of technologies. So that was also really exciting. There's always new material handling systems. They were one of the first adopters of automated storage and retrieval systems, that kind of
Mhm.
stuff. So it's always really, really exciting. You get to see all the cool new technologies coming out, new technologies around refrigeration systems.
Sure.
We're seeing a lot of interest in sustainability now. And when you're doing cold storage, you can't just throw up some solar panels and expect it to run your building, right? So
Right.
you're looking at, oh, okay, how do I do cogen plants? How do I do these much more complex, sustainable initiatives? So it creates a lot of fascinating projects
Yeah,
because you're always,
sure.
exploring these new technologies.
So
Mhm.
how does Ware Malcomb go to market then? How do you guys get business?
We have three
Yeah,
kind of
yeah,
major client groups, right? So
yeah.
we have developers, certainly are a big part of our client basis. So we work with a
Okay.
lot of different developers, and we meet them at conferences like
Yeah.
NIOP. We have our general contractors that we work with. So
Mhm.
I do a lot of that business development through CEBA, but we also know a wide variety of general contractors who we work with
Sure.
regularly and who will
Sure.
bring us opportunities and are fantastic to work with.
Yeah.
We have all of these design build partnerships with them.
Mhm.
And then end users, and an end user might be, just something that we hear through the grapevine. We're trying to figure out what the best trade shows are for approaching, with those end users, and
Mhm.
certainly IARW is one of them for the public refrigerated warehouses. But
Yep.
there's
Mhm.
so many trade shows for
Oh
food
yeah.
processors, so
Oh,
Oh
yes.
yeah.
that one we're still kind of figuring out how to meet the right people,
Sure.
but it creates a lot of different opportunities. And
Oh yeah.
it's a lot of it is just me getting out there and doing podcasts and other fun
There you
stuff like
go.
that, sharing
Yeah.
expertise. I mean, a lot of what I've been doing is trying to create a lot of material that's educational to people. So we did an ebook for NIOP about cold storage design, and that's been a fantastic way to reach out to people.
So Kate, you mentioned NIOP a lot. Can you tell us what NIOP is?
Yeah, so NIOP is the Commercial Real Estate Development Association. It
Got
has
it.
nothing to do with the acronym NIOP, but that's one of those old ones that's stuck around. And it's an
Yeah.
association that focuses on developers and real estate brokers,
Yeah.
people
Sure.
in the real estate industry. And so it's a way for us to network with a lot of
Yeah.
people who are designing buildings, wanting to
Yeah.
do new buildings.
You bet. It's like the old IASIC a
Oh,
long time ago
yes.
before it became CEBA. Everyone's like, IASIC, what does that mean? You know, the acronym it was extremely hard to pronounce. I mean,
Yep,
it just it had to be the name had to change. So,
absolutely.
you know, IRW, you don't try to pronounce IARW, you just use the letters, right? So,
Hmm.
but that's changing. That's kind of just falling on all under the Global Cold Chain Alliance umbrella, right? So
Yep.
it's just GCCA. So trade shows are huge, meet a lot of people, see a lot of great technology. Pack Expo is insane. Like if you
Hmm.
want to see automated machine robots, suction cup things and put them all over the place, bottle, like Pack Expo is insane for that technology.
Hmm.
I learned a ton at CEBA, Control Environment
Yep.
Building Association, because all the suppliers and vendors are there showcasing their new high-speed doors, right? Or
Hmm.
their new foam systems or their new panel technology. So we try to attend as many trade shows as possible because, when we represent our company, we want to provide value to the general contractors and the architects and our
Hmm.
clients who may never even see us or meet us, right? Because we're not dealing with the
True.
end user, but we want to make sure we're providing the latest and greatest, right? So,
Absolutely.
and networking's huge. I mean, so I've seen you at trade shows forever, and I'm sure we're going to continue to see you at all these shows for
Absolutely.
sure.
Yeah. I love going to shows, especially when they have an educational component, right? The business development part of it is important and,
Mhm.
going out and meeting people, but also that's where you can learn a lot of things. And that's always really exciting to see
Mhm.
what the new technologies are and, what new products are out there. Every time someone comes out with a new product, it's a new opportunity to design a building in a different way and maybe a better way. So we are always looking for, those new products that might be game changers.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm. What, in your opinion, would you say have been some of like the largest changes or, exciting new technology that, is happening in thermal design in the past few years,
Hmm.
maybe?
So one of the things that's been really fascinating over the past few years is how vertical we're going on these buildings.
Mm,
And a lot of that is technology driven, right?
Mhm.
So
yeah.
largely fire suppression and fire prevention technologies have been a huge part of that. In a cold storage building, you don't want to have a bunch of sprinklers where people can hit them. It's a bad idea. People are going to pop those sprinklers. You're going to freeze all your pipes, and you're just going to have a building that's down for a while because someone made a mistake. So, when I was first starting out, Quell was just coming out, right? And oh gosh, we can go, 45 feet with the, ceiling only sprinkler protection, and 45 feet was a huge deal.
I remember
well, now
that wasn't that long. That wasn't that long
it was
ago.
not that long
That was
ago,
not that
right?
long ago. Yeah.
So, and then, it's those technologies have kept on creeping upward. ESFR, if you're doing a box and box, can go, I think, like 50 feet now. And then the really exciting new one is the low oxygen systems. And that's, with a low oxygen system, we're looking at 140-foot tall rack supported towers of cold storage, which is just, it's unbelievable how tall we can go, and it's so much more efficient. Like if you're have the same number of pallets and you were to spread it out horizontally at 36 feet clear or whatever standard industrial is, right? You're looking at millions of square feet, and if you think about cooling millions of square feet, it's so much refrigeration, it's so much power. Whereas if you're going vertically, then you're using that cold cycle, warm air rising, cool air falling, and you're using all of that natural system in order to cool the same number of pallets with much, much less refrigeration. And so it's just, it's better for the environment. It's, it's infinitely more efficient. It uses up less land. There's just so many benefits to going vertical. And so it's really exciting to see those technologies emerge, which allow us to design buildings in that way.
The vertical buildings are fascinating. Because I've been in many, and 140 feet tall, 120 feet.
Yeah.
But they have these little racetracks down each aisle, and these motorized like roller coaster that goes up and down in this way, and it just is automatically picking stuff and flying it to the cold dock door. Door pops up, goes in a conveyor pops it out to the cold dock. You have no one working in that freezer at all.
Which is fantastic. Who wants to work in a freezer? It's a miserable place to work. Bless all the folks who are working in the freezers day in and day out in their big heavy coats and their big heavy boots, right? They are critical to the food supply of this country. But if we can turn those jobs into jobs where you can sit somewhere warm and fix robots all day, then I think it's a benefit.
It is a benefit. Even from a safety standpoint, right? Yes. So you're removing people from harm's way. I think
absolutely.
That's ASRS, the tall buildings, is it better to use ammonia or like a CO2 for refrigeration there? What do you typically see there?
So we're seeing both ammonia and CO2 kind of neck and neck right now. Ammonia, I think the big concern with ammonia is the regulatory, right? So a standard ammonia system, not a low charge system, there's a lot of regulations that go around it. And there's parts of this country, like if you go to New Jersey, you can't put in an ammonia system. You're going to have someone on site so much, it's going to cost you an absolute fortune. So there's places where ammonia just doesn't work. There's, safe health and safety concerns in certain cities, have all sorts of concerns around ammonia. So CO2 has come onto the market much more recently. It's been a fantastic refrigerant. It's really doing very, very well. It's a lot of energy, right? So as compared to ammonia systems, we're usually looking at bigger, power services for CO2 systems. So that's kind of the trade-off. But I think they're both fantastic. It's great to see the world moving away from kind of the global warming potential refrigerants, the freons and all of that, and into more of these natural refrigerants, which have really low global warming potential. So it really gives a lot of opportunity to make the world a little bit greener.
Absolutely.
But I think ammonia and CO2 are both incredibly popular, and we see both of them used a lot in a lot of different applications.
Yeah. Let's stay on the ASRS tall building train here, because it's obviously where we're going.
Where the future is going.
The stack joint with the instrumental panel. I've now seen 3 different stack joints at, because obviously for the general public listening, a insulated metal panel can typically, you can run and make one that is anywhere from 65 to 71 feet tall, depending on who you're buying from and what plant it's coming out of.
Right. And how much
somewhere
you're
in there.
willing to pay an oversized load to
Yeah.
get it transported to your job site. That's the other thing, right? Panels used to be a truck length, right?
I know.
You'd go 53 feet and that was your panel. And then we started doing these oversized ones, but
and the clients got to understand. I mean, it's like $7,500 a truck to ship a 60-foot panel. Any panel over 55 feet, you're paying an arm and a leg for the special trucking, and it's expensive. But
it's worth it on a building where you can minimize your stack joints, right?
Correct.
Stack joints are a weak spot in your envelope. So you know, anytime you can minimize that, and you know, I'd love to see, you know, new technologies around stack joints that make them better. Always looking for new solutions there too.
There's a million ways to skin a cat on that for sure. I've seen a bunch of different details, and everyone's got their own preference, right? Are you, you know, are you caulking joints above the stack joint of the panels? What are you doing to avoid caulking panel joints? Some people don't like that because they get dirty, they get brown from the dust, and so much.
But butyl caulks, you know, it's creating that continuity of envelope, right? Like, so that's the point of the caulking, right? The exterior, it's like exterior is just aesthetic, right? It keeps the water out, but really, you know, it's the deep down butyl that's the critical part of it.
For sure.
Anything on the outside, it's like it's aesthetics, but it's maintenance, right? So if you're not going to maintain it, then you're not really gaining the aesthetics out of it. So let's look at different, you know, flashing systems or other things to keep the water out rather than relying on caulk.
Thank you. Yes, there's a better way. Yes, there is. I believe there is a better way to keep that water out for sure. Yeah, absolutely. Very cool. So I guess next question, where do you see the industry going in regards to not so much ASRS, but thermal design? Do you see any changes in the actual thermal design game in regard? Because I've seen a million different things. Say, I'll give you an example. Box and box construction, right? The building is already there. Client wants to move in, build a cooler freezer inside an existing building. There's a million different ways to do thermal designs inside that box and box. I have a story for you on that, by the way, which I'll segue into. Liner panels, right? Are you sticking liner panels up against the tilt wall? Are you sticking them off the tilt wall 1.5 inches, 6 inches? Is there preference? What do you think?
I like them right up against the tilt wall, right? Anytime you're just an inch and a half, or even 6 inches, right? It's just a place where your condensation is going to get trapped, right? So pushing them up against that wall, less opportunity for condensation, right?
Yeah, totally.
But you see it all the time, right? And it's you know, a lot of the prefab cooler guys, they keep them off the walls, right? That's very standard for a prefabricated.
Do you know why they do that?
Why do they do that?
Because those panels are cam lock box panels and they have no movement whatsoever. So when you lock them together, they have to be exactly straight. Okay. So if you use a panel you and I are used to seeing from favorite panel manufacturer players out there, I'll name drop Metalspan, all other Kingspan, Greenspan, right? All those. That tongue and groove system allows a little bit of play where if you line a wall and it's just not exactly even, right, you can line that and work, you know what I mean? That's why.
That's interesting. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that, but yeah, the cam locks, they'd have to be off because you have to get them perfectly straight. So, but yeah, I mean, put it up right up against the wall. Envelope design is we're always finding better ways to do things. So, and that's why I like being an architect rather than working with, you know, a design build company. There's certainly been opportunity for me to be a architect under a single design build contractor, but then I wouldn't see the million ways that different contractors build things. You know, I would be seeing the way that one. So
we submit shop drawings, you look at them like, that's not what our detail. Like, yeah, but we're going to warranty this thing. So we're going to use our detail. And then we're fighting.
Mostly I try to make my fight like, you know, on something very, very, you know, where I can hang my hat. So, you know, I never fight a detail because it doesn't match my detail. I fight a detail but this one doesn't have continuity of vapor barrier and mine does. So what are you thinking about there?
Exactly. my segue to that detail question is my favorite detail on box and box is when you have a liner panel up against a tilt wall or concrete wall. I love to cut the concrete or tilt wall opening a little bit larger. So when you run your panel across that face of that opening, you can install that door to the panel and not have to use a 16 or 18-inch deep jam and install it to the exterior of the building where it's subject to weather and rain. You're tucking it inside a cavity where it is on, like it's its own, it has its own rain hood. It's protected from the environment, right? So I posted about this detail, I think like a month ago on our Instagram, and one of the Ware Malcomb employees commented and they're like, "Hey, that's the detail we use." I'm like, "No way, that's awesome." Never met the person in my life. It was awesome.
Yeah, we do love that detail. And I was just visiting a building that I did several years ago before I knew about that detail, and it had the big thick jams, and I'm like, oh yeah, I wouldn't do it that way anymore. Like it's you're always learning, you're always finding new ways of doing details and doing design that's going to improve your envelope and make it easier to construct, and all these different things. So always learning.
That's amazing. Well, I would love to ask you one of our questions that we ask all of our guests. It's one of our sponsored questions this week, or in this episode, by Rytec. So thank you to our friends at Rytec for sponsoring our cool moment question. So can you share with us a cool moment that you've had within your time in the industrial cold and food, industry that stands out to you? Maybe it's something funny. Maybe it's something that made you go, this is where I want to have my career. I'm not leaving. Like I found my home, something like that.
Right. One of the earliest projects I did was the preferred freezer up in San Leandro. And that one was such a wonderful learning experience for me. It was, I had job captained on projects. I had, helped out on projects, but it was the first time where I was in the driver's seat. So I was the project manager on that. It was a big deal. And it was, everything's on you, right? So you're the one who's responsible when the detail's wrong. And there were details I got wrong on that project. But that's how you learn, right? That's how you learn, is by going out to the field and having contractors tell you, gosh, I don't know how you expect me to build this door threshold. And it was sub-zero construction, and the sub-zero construction came to me.
I remember that job very well at the time.
Yep. Yes. They pointed it right out to me. They're like, how do you expect me to build this? And I'm like, oh, I don't expect you to build that. Let me figure out a way for you to this actually be buildable. But yeah, I mean, it was a fantastic job. It was, I think, a 66-foot freezer. I remember going up on the roof of that thing and just being like, I'm not afraid of heights, right? I was a theater geek. I used to run the rigging. I had no problem with heights, and I go up on top of 66 feet with no parapet. I'm going, oh, Lord have mercy.
I'm not a height guy.
This is properly tall.
I don't do heights.
This one does not do well in heights.
Listen, I'm short for a reason. I don't need to be that tall. I don't like heights.
Oh yeah, it was properly tall, but it was so amazing seeing the steel go up for that, and just how much height there was, and seeing every piece of it go together. So
that's the job where they painted the mural on the side of the building.
They painted the mural. They painted the whales on the side of it.
The whales.
It was a big deal. It's beautiful. You see it right off the BART. It's fantastic.
You see it off the freeway, don't you too?
Yep.
Is there a freeway that runs right next to it?
Yeah. Okay. So there was so much heartburn over painting the panels, right? And oh gosh, are we avoiding the warranty? And what's going to be the thermal dynamics of a painted insulated metal panel? It's beautiful. It's beautiful, but yeah, it's definitely a little.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, you start painting panels, you're changing the thermal dynamics there with that panel and the spans and everything. Because we did a job in Arizona where the client's like, hey, I want a 3-colored building. Because some, as you know, some like industrial parks or cities don't want just a white paneled building. And we're running into that more and more today where, we get GCs asking us, hey, what kind of, can we use like this cool architectural panel for this, negative 10-degree freezer? We're like, well, there's limitations there.
Yeah.
Yes and no, you can't, but you can't go too dark, right? I mean, beige or sandstone is as dark as you want to go, but they wanted to paint this building 3 different colors.
Mm-hmm.
to make it look like it was in the desert and it had a blue on it and all this stuff. And we actually had to take that color and give it to the panel manufacturer. And then they had to redo their panel calculations based on, okay, where are your girth spacing is going to be now? How much back fastening are you going to need if you paint it this color in this type of, where the color is going to be? It's crazy.
That's an enormous amount of detail. I try to steer people away from paint. I like using, the prefabricated panel colors. It's just another maintenance thing, right? And there's fantastic colors for insulated metal panels now. You can get a whole rainbow of colors. So, but there's just, it's an ongoing challenge in working with insulated metal panel buildings. We do a lot of box and box or, hybrid box and box where you do a liner panel on a tilt panel because cities like tilt panels. They like that in their industrial parks. It looks consistent with the area, whereas you throw in metal panels and they're going, I don't know what I'm looking at here. Is this going to be one of those, awful, 1940s Butler buildings that I see rusting down the side of the freeway, right?
Sure.
It's just like, no, it's not that. It's going to look real nice and clean and it's going to be, nice and white and shiny, and they don't believe you. So, but, we've come up with some great details over the years on how to dress up those panels, how to create a little bit of, ins and outs and depth. And, it's always thermally better to just go a nice straight flat surface, but there's ways of creating a little bit of depth to the panel and creating some facades on it. So there's ways we can play around with that to get a city to be happy with us while still keeping the envelope, the best possible envelope for cold storage.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, you've been to so many trade shows. I'm stealing Jenna's question because I love this question. What's your favorite trade show out of the whole year? What's your favorite trade show you like going to?
CEBA's my favorite. CEBA's absolutely my favorite.
Awesome.
The great thing about CEBA is the committees. So I've been part of the construction committees for a long time, and it's just a great opportunity to be able to engage and discuss kind of the issues that are impacting our industry in terms of the codes that are out there, and find ways of either working within those codes that are better, or maybe even fighting those codes a little bit and saying, hey, this code is meant for not cold storage buildings, and it really doesn't work for cold storage buildings. So how can we, make sure that there's an exception in the code if you're at minus 10 degrees, all these different kinds of things. So I've really enjoyed that kind of engagement. CEBA is a great association, and love going to the conferences.
It's a pretty fun one. We like it. We'll Venmo you later.
You get no kickback from CEBA. We don't even get a discount. We don't. I mean, what's up, guys? We don't. No.
Well,
we want to be cognizant of your time. Is there anything that you want to add? Anything that we might have left out?
No. Nothing comes to mind. Well, I think
that's good though. But that means we had a good conversation.
Absolutely.
So why don't you let our listeners know where they can find out more about you and Ware Malcomb?
So you can find Ware Malcomb at our website, waremalcomb.com. That's WareMalcomb.com.
Perfect.
If you can see, if you're on
YouTube,
you can see Ware Malcomb right there.
We'll even list the website for you in the show notes.
Oh yeah, it'll be there.
Fantastic.
Direct links.
And then you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm Kate Lyle, and I post there all the time about things that I'm seeing, news articles that I see that are impacting industrial buildings and cold storage and food processing, all the regulations that are coming out. So it's a good place to follow me there too.
Yes, you have some great content, and I love following you on LinkedIn. So, but before I let you go, I am going to grab at least one more minute of your time because we have to do the cool rapid round questions, which is sponsored by Rytech High Speed Doors. So I'm going to ask you this or that questions. We're going to learn all about you right now with what I'm going to ask you. Okay. You ready for this?
Okay. I'm ready.
You got to answer one or the other. Okay.
All right.
Are you music or podcast?
Music.
Coke or Pepsi?
Coke.
Netflix or YouTube?
Netflix.
Ocean or mountains?
Ooh. Mountains.
Box and box project or ground up?
ground up. I'm an architect.
Touché.
I love it.
Are you a cold beer or cold drink?
Cold drink.
Cold drink or wine?
Cold drink.
I love it. Are you okay? Fine. Last but not least, Justin Timberlake or Justin Bieber?
Justin Timberlake.
Heyo. I love it. Well, Kate, thank you so much for your time today. This was a badass podcast. This one has been incredible. I think our listeners are going to get a lot out of it. We loved it. Thank you for your time. And thank you all for listening to the Cool Times podcast. You guys can find our work on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram. All those social media platforms will we share about a 30 second to 60-second link of the show. If you want to listen to the podcast, you guys can listen to it on Apple Podcasts and watch the entire video and see our pretty faces at YouTube under Cool Times Podcast. Subscribe, hit the red button. Guys, we appreciate you. Kate, thank you so much for your time. And until next time, folks, thank you. See ya.
Thank you.